The Arnold cave system in South Wales is a massive underground maze that strikes fear and wonder into the hearts of explorers. By 1974, this ancient formation remained largely mysterious, with only 30% of its passages mapped. The cave's tunnels twist beneath rolling green hills like dark veins, creating an environment where light and sound disappear into darkness older than human history. What makes Arnold particularly challenging are its sumps, underwater tunnels where the cave's ceiling dips below the water level. These submerged passages force explorers to navigate through tight, water-filled spaces that test both their courage and diving skills. The combination of darkness, confined spaces, and underwater challenges makes Arnold one of the most dangerous cave systems to explore. Its reputation as a formidable underground fortress has earned it respect among the caving community worldwide. Before we dive into this story, subscribe our channel for more caving stories. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Martin Farr and Roger Solari were extraordinary young explorers who had already made their mark in the United Kingdom's caving community, despite their young ages of 23 and 26. These two men weren't content with ordinary adventures. They had spent nearly a decade mastering the art of dry caving, which involved navigating through tight rocky spaces and unstable boulder fields. Their reputation for being fearless and determined grew with each expedition they completed. However, by 1974, they had discovered a new passion that would ultimately lead to tragedy: cave diving. This dangerous form of exploration was relatively new to them, as they had only 3 years of diving experience between them. This was far less than what was typically needed for the challenging dives they planned to attempt. Despite their limited underwater experience, their confidence and previous success in dry caving pushed them to take on increasingly difficult challenges. Their enthusiasm and determination to push boundaries made them stand out in the caving community, but it also led them to sometimes overlook the risks involved in their ambitious explorations. The third sump in Arnold Cave presented an extraordinary challenge that few cave divers dared to attempt. At 850 feet long, nearly the length of 3 football fields, it was almost 3 times longer than what most cave divers considered safe to explore. Most divers avoided sumps longer than 300 feet, making this particular tunnel especially daunting. The length alone made it a formidable obstacle, but it was the unknown that made it truly challenging. In May 1974, Martin Farr took on this challenge alone, conducting a solo reconnaissance dive while Roger stayed behind due to a knee injury. This decision went against modern safety rules, but in the 1970s, such risks were common. Martin's diving equipment was basic by today's standards. He used rubber wetsuits that could easily tear, unreliable single-hose regulators that often malfunctioned, and aluminum tanks held on with simple nylon straps. There were no modern safety devices like dive computers or emergency air reserves. His only tools were a basic depth gauge and a compass, along with his raw courage and determination. On June 15, 1974, Martin Farr and Roger Solari stood at the entrance of Arnold Cave, preparing for what would become their final expedition together. Each man carried 6 aluminum air tanks, with each tank weighing 35 pounds and containing 80 cubic feet of compressed air. Under perfect conditions, this would provide about 40 minutes of underwater breathing time, but cave diving is never perfect. The journey to reach the third sump was brutal, taking them 4 hours of crawling through tight spaces, where collapsed cave ceilings left gaps barely wider than their shoulders. Their basic equipment, cotton overalls and wool sweaters, offered little protection as sharp limestone rocks tore at their clothing. The cave's constant temperature of 40 degrees Fahrenheit meant hypothermia was a real threat. When they finally reached the third sump, they switched to fresh tanks. Martin took the lead with Roger following close behind. As they emerged from the water into the chamber Martin had discovered weeks earlier, they were about to enter territory that no human had ever explored before. Deep in the fourth sump, tragedy struck without warning. Roger began experiencing sinus barotrauma, an excruciating condition where pressure changes cause severe pain in the head, often described as feeling like an ice pick being driven into the forehead. Through the murky water, Martin saw Roger desperately clawing at his diving mask, clearly in extreme distress. Despite the obvious danger signs, they pushed forward until their guideline reel ran out at 400 feet into the tunnel. Martin, with numbed fingers, tied his line to Rogers in a clumsy knot. The visibility dropped to zero as silt clouded the water, and they could only navigate by touch. Rogers' condition worsened rapidly, but in the confined space of the underwater tunnel, there was nowhere to stop and help. The situation quickly spiraled into a fight for survival. Martin's escape from the cave became a terrifying race against time. With his primary tank empty, he switched to his backup, which had only 900 psi, enough for about 20 minutes of air if he breathed carefully. When he reached the fourth sump's pool, he discovered something horrifying. The guideline had been cleanly cut about 430 feet from the entrance. Roger had likely severed it after becoming tangled, choosing to cut free rather than drown. Without this lifeline, Martin knew Roger was lost forever in the darkness. Fighting hypothermia in the 40-degree water, Martin faced the third sump with barely 30 cubic feet of air left, giving him less than 15 minutes to swim 850 feet. His regulator malfunctioned, spewing precious air into the water. He managed to reach the exit with only 5 minutes of air remaining. For 12 long years, the mystery of Roger's fate haunted the caving community until October 1986 brought closure. A team led by explorers Ian Rowland and Julian Walker, equipped with modern technology like ultrasonic guideline reels and improved lighting, made a shocking discovery 720 feet into the fourth sump. They found Roger's body in an eerily preserved state, thanks to the cave's constant 40-degree water temperature. He lay on his side, his features still recognizable, one hand gripping a backup regulator and the other holding a rusted dive knife. His face showed no signs of panic, suggesting a calm acceptance of his fate. After careful consideration, the team made the difficult decision to leave his body where it lay. Today, a brass plaque near the first sump bears his name, and the simple words, "He ventured further." The tragedy at Aanolid Cave fundamentally changed cave diving forever. The incident led to stricter safety protocols and better equipment development in the cave diving community. Modern divers now use advanced technology like ultrasonic guideline reels, improved lighting systems, and reliable breathing apparatus, a far cry from the basic gear of 1974. The rule of thirds for air management became strictly enforced, not just a suggestion. Today, cave diving teams must include at least 4 members, with 2 rescue divers always on standby. Martin Farr went on to become a respected cave diving instructor, using his experience to teach others about safety. The brass plaque near Aanolid's entrance serves as a permanent reminder of the price paid for these lessons. Roger's story continues to educate new generations of cave divers about the importance of respecting nature's boundaries.